I've found myself living a rather remarkable fate as I've entered my 60s. It seems I may be one of those women who can't live without a man. Even if you were to spit at me and curse me, I feel I wouldn't have the right to complain. I'm here to share a story that I've been unable to discuss anywhere else. Please, like and subscribe. Up until my 50s, I lived with my husband and mother-in-law, running a boarding house near a college. My daughter was a college student at the time, attending a university in a different area. My husband's job required him to travel abroad frequently. His trips would leave the house empty for anywhere from 3 days to 2 weeks at a time. The boarding house, which had been operated by my in-laws since their youth, was now my responsibility as well. With my mother-in-law being of advanced age, I took care of nearly everything. My daily routine consisted of cooking for the number of students we had, cleaning and tidying up. It was a relentless cycle without any days off, and I was utterly tired of it. Although we had a part-time worker to help, it wasn't much relief because I never really had any time to myself. Cooking for the boarders meant preparing food in large quantities, and my mother-in-law would help with this. One day, while we were busy cooking, one of the boarders, a young man from a nearby college, offered to help out because he was bored. His assistance, especially with lifting heavy items, made the work much easier. I was so grateful to him. He was a good-looking young man, and despite his slender build, which made me think he might be weak, he proved to be very strong and reliable. On a hot summer day, after working up a sweat, helping us, I felt an immense sense of gratitude towards him. It wasn't me who suggested it, but my mother-in-law insisted that we show our appreciation by treating him to chicken for dinner. Without thinking much of it, I told the young man to join us for dinner that evening. He hesitated, saying it wasn't necessary, but I insisted, and he reluctantly agreed. I was so hot that day that I didn't feel like eating dinner. When I decided to buy the student chicken, I thought having a beer with it would suffice for me. As the evening went on, the student and I found ourselves chatting over chicken and beer. At one point, the student paused from drinking their beer and asked when my husband would be returning. They seemed unable to look directly at me. I was wearing a dress and deliberately took a relaxed posture. I'm not sure why I acted that way. Perhaps to allow the student to see what they wanted. Even so, I couldn't help but think, would a student close to my daughter's age be interested in me? And a ridiculous laugh escaped me. It was a funny situation, so I laughed foolishly. Alcohol must have played a significant role in making me laugh like that. I told the student my husband would return in 3 days. The student nodded silently, then asked, "Don't you feel lonely when your husband is away on business trips?" Their voice was incredibly shaky. I was taken aback by the question and blurted out, "I do feel lonely. Why? Are you offering to ease my loneliness?" I regretted my response as soon as I said it, and I began to feel shaky. After finishing the chicken, the student and I went to our respective rooms. My heart was pounding uncontrollably. At that time, it had been nearly a year since I entered menopause. I thought women lost all desire after menopause. Having been devoted to my husband for over 20 years, my knowledge was limited, it seems. Feeling my heart race like that at my age seemed absurd. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep, when I heard a knock at the door. My first thought was, could it be the student? Hoping against hope, I opened the door to find the students standing there with their head bowed. I quickly checked the hallway, then pulled the student into my room. They stood with their head down, as if they had committed a crime. The student's apology was so endearing that I almost laughed out loud. I told the student, "I couldn't sleep because I missed you too. I'm glad you came." "Thank you." My voice was trembling as we lay side by side on the bed. The student made me incredibly happy. By dawn, I was sitting on the bed, gently stroking the student's back. The next day, at a similar time, the student knocked on my door again. I was eagerly waiting for him. My husband had been home for a while after returning from a business trip, so that student and I could only exchange longing looks. I was just waiting for the day my husband would leave on another trip. Finally, he went abroad for work, and I smiled at that student. However, the student didn't smile back and avoided my gaze. Away from the eyes of others, I asked, "Did I do something wrong? If I did, can you tell me? I'll apologize if I've made a mistake." Despite my words, the student forced a smile. "You'll come to my room later, right? If you come, I'll beg for forgiveness. I'll do whatever you ask, okay?" When I cooed like that, the student's expression softened. Later, I found out that the student had been jealous of my husband. I reassured him by saying, "You look much more handsome than my husband. Nothing has happened between us, and it's been quite a while." That day, the student was a bit rough with me. I acted a bit pouty towards him, but deep down, I was really pleased. I had to endure the student's attention until he graduated from college, became a working adult, and left our boarding house. I believe you all understand that it wasn't harassment in a bad sense. Even after that, the student would occasionally visit me until he eventually faded from my life. Then, after a very long time, I met the student again. It was utterly shocking. He was the man my daughter brought home, introducing him as her fiancé. He had changed so much that I initially didn't recognize him. My mother-in-law recognized him first. She greeted him warmly and asked how he had been. The student said he had landed a good job and was doing well. My daughter had been attending university in a different area when he was boarding at our house, so she initially didn't know he had been our lodger. As they talked, she found out, and it seemed that he had pursued her actively, leading to their relationship. And so, the student married my daughter and became my son-in-law. My daughter would constantly boast about her husband, saying how charming he is. As a matter of fact, I know better than anyone. Whenever my son-in-law came to our house, he would give me these subtle looks. I would always blush in response. Whether I was preparing a meal or doing the dishes, he would stick by my side and help me. When he casually stroked my arm or shoulder while talking, memories of the past would flutter back, making my heart race. Even though I am now well into my 60s, I thought I would never feel that way again after he left our boarding house. However, those thrilling feelings came rushing back the other day when it was just my son-in-law and I. He asked, "Mother, what happens if I knock on your door again?" I was trembling and couldn't respond. It was something I had deeply desired. Yet I was internally scolding myself, thinking I shouldn't want such things. Then he asked, "So will you hold my hand and enter the room like before?" His gaze, as he awaited my answer, felt unbearably piercing. I nodded my head. After a while, when I looked up at my son-in-law, he was smiling. That smile was so beautiful that I found myself smiling back without realizing it. Then, not long ago, when my daughter and her husband came to stay at our house. I heard someone knocking on my door late at night. I jumped out of bed, opened the door, and there was my son-in-law standing there. Just like before, I glanced around outside the room before bringing him in. His matured, dependable presence kept me awake until dawn. He kept whispering, "It's okay as long as no one knows." And I nodded. In truth, after my son-in-law graduated from university and left our boarding house, I missed him terribly for a while, but realizing there was nothing I could do, I gave up and went on with my life. The thought that I would never have a man in my life again was profoundly bitter. Yet, seeing such events unfold again makes me think my fate is indeed peculiar. I never thought that a fluttering heart could return to an old woman who has been menopausal for nearly 10 years. My husband keeps asking me if something good has happened lately. It seems I'm unknowingly showing it. I've decided to accept my fate, even if you spit on me and curse me.